Hello everyone, Lewis Weber here with Behavior Care. In this segment we are going to be taking a look at some of the key features of TPS. This training is designed for Oak Park new hires with no familiarity or limited familiarity with TPS. We will be looking at some of the highlights of TPS so that you can get started collecting data and then grow your knowledge as you collect more uh, data and have more experiences with TPS. TPS stands for Total Progress System, and it's how we collect data at Oak Park, but also throughout Sarasota County schools. When you open up your Outlook, or at some point when you open up your Outlook, you will receive a link to your TPS file. It'll have your name listed here on the teacher section of the setup tab, which is where we're at right now. And uh, you hopefully will have your grade level. I'm hesitating because I'm not sure what the roster will say, but your grade level might also be showing in there. And there'll be these 10 default recording periods, which uh, you will need to change, or you can change, to match your daily schedule. So let's just talk about that right now because that's something that you might want to do. You can leave them as periods 1 through 10, but I encourage you to customize them for your classroom. So your school day can be divided up into 10 recording periods, and you don't have to use them all. But if you do, what you do is type them in here. So maybe you want something like arrival, and then maybe it's math, or maybe ELA, or recess, and maybe lunch, maybe specials, and so forth. Something that you might want to consider after you fill in some of these others is maybe the last period of the day would be a conference where you have an opportunity to review with your students how they did during their TPS day, their school day. Okay, so that's how you establish your recording periods. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to the data entry tab, and just to show you what those do, when you change the recording periods here, it's going to assign them to each student. There are 12 possible students, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so you can see what happens here. So here is first student and the second student. Now you can see there's a bunch of data entered in here because this is a demo file. And as I scroll to the right, we have the next student, Tiramisu, and then Chuck Roast, and so forth. And each student gets this vertical arrangement. And all of the school days are entered for you, so you don't have to do any kind of date entering, which cuts down on time and errors as well. Let's scroll back to Pete Moss, and you can see Pete has all sorts of data that are entered, and there are a few things that we need to talk about. So let's just do that right now. Once TPS has been set up with your recording periods here on the Setup tab, you can go to Data Entry and start collecting data. Now, we have two sections here, but what I want to illustrate here is the daily recording block, which is highlighted right now. So the date is at the top left, and then you have recording periods, and then you have your increasing and your decreasing targets, and then this last row are percentages based on these numbers. And so what I want to do now is talk about how these numbers are collected. Here are the four increasing targets that we have, which we call ROAR, of course, respect on task, accepting, responsible. And here are four decreasing targets. Now you may not need all of these decreasing targets, and I'm going to show you how to change those. But for all students at Oak Park, we have ROAR, and this is an important way to support many of the positive behavior intervention and support routines, the behavior intervention plans, IEP goals. They're based on these behaviors. Now, what respect means and on task and accepting responsible, that's for another training. What I want to talk about now is actually how to collect the data. So we have a 0 to 4 rating system, and you can see it's listed on top for each student. 0 is 0, 1 is low, 2 is medium, 3 is high, 4 is very high. It is a rating scale. Same scale is used for the increasing targets as it is for the decreasing targets. So when a student exhibits a very high level of respect and a very high level of on task and accepting and responsible, as you can see right here during ELA, the student receives a 4 because the student exhibited that high level for each of these target behaviors. Now, Pete also exhibited a 0 level of verbal aggression, physical aggression, property, and others to property and elopement. So the zeros here represent that the behavior did not occur. There was no evidence of it, and so that was a good recording period. However, let's look at specials. During specials, we see that Pete exhibited a 0 level of respect and a 0 level of on task and accepting. In fact, he had a very high level of verbal aggression and a very high level of physical aggression to others and so forth. That's how you do it. It's really that straightforward. We want to see all 4s here. We want to see all 0s here. Now, there are some interplays between these two sides, but I don't want you to think about them as opposites in terms of measures. Sometimes these numbers can go down independently of some of these numbers. For example, a student could be respectful and then maybe the student left the room. So they overlap, but they're not opposites in the sense of when one goes down, the other has to go. When one goes up, the other has to go down, and so forth. We want to think of these things as behaviors that we want the student to do in terms of ROAR, respect, on task, accepting, and responsible. These decreasing targets are specific ways that the student is exhibiting a behavioral challenge. So again, there is overlap between these. When this goes down, this tends to go up, but it doesn't have to be this perfect flip between these two. Okay? We'll talk more about that at another training. But for right now, the idea is these numbers, we would like to see the student exhibit at a level of 4. And over here, we want to see a student not exhibit any of these behaviors, which would be a level 0. Now, for each day, there are percentages that are calculated based on the numbers that have been entered. The student is not penalized for blank rows. For example, in this case, although it's not marked, I'll put it in. I'll say Pete arrived late. And that's why there's no data collected over here. And this will tell us why. And so these notes are helpful in that they tell you what it is that the student did in ways that are adding more detail to what I want to do is get rid of that spelling error there. More detail than the numbers provide. Now, there's a balance between these two things. We want the numbers to do the heavy lifting. We don't want you to write notes that are too long. Well, what is a note that's too long? I would say this is long enough. If you're getting near the end of the line here, one row's worth, ideally it would be to keep the note within the space down here, which would be something like about that long. And we can enter just a few more text. So I'm just putting some gibberish there, something like about that long. And the reason why is we don't want you to spend too much time with the details. add the details as they are important, and they are important, but we don't need for it to be extended. Now each of these rows here corresponds to the recording period. So this happened during recording period 8, or this happened during recording period recess, and that's how you can enter your notes. Here is a note for the whole day, and that's why it's colored in this cyan blue. This denotes that it didn't occur necessarily during a particular recording period. It's a general note. All these others are associated with this particular recording period. Now this is going to come in handy when we go to home notes. A couple other things to keep in mind. Once one area is this event code area, and these event codes tell us why the student exhibited a behavioral challenge. We have to go back to setup to see what those codes are, and they're right here. Code number 10 through 22. There's some more over here which we'll hold off for during this training. You can use these codes right here, and when you see one of these things occur, you can enter them right over here in the event code section. Just put a comma between each one so that you know that it's a different code number. Now, these codes here are older codes which are not in the current version, so I had changed this, but I didn't note it when I was doing this training. So it would be, let's say, code 10 or code 12 or code 14. So let's just get rid of that, and you can now see me do this. So code 10, what is code 10? Code 10 was social conflict with peer, and maybe there was an unwanted task demand. So I would put 10, comma 12, for example. And these codes will be very important. Now for the next training, I'll go ahead and update these numbers. It's one of those things that sometimes happens when I do a training program. All right, so that's how you enter these numbers right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to a day that is open right here. Let's say that today was 8/22. What I want to do is I want to show you a really great time saver, and this is by putting a P in that yellow box and hitting enter. Now watch what happens. It's going to enter the data for a perfect day. All fours on the left, all zeros on the right. And then you might say, well, what if the student doesn't have a perfect day? Then what you do is just change the ones that were not perfect. So maybe there was something going on like this. And I'm just making these numbers up, and you can see. So now, if I got rid of that P, which I'll do by just hitting delete, what you can do is do it in the opposite direction. You can enter the numbers that you know are not perfect in the sense of students exhibiting perfect behavior. Enter those numbers in, and then when you're done, you just go back and you say, well, everything else was pretty good. Was a very high level. And so when you enter the P and hit enter, it just fills in around those numbers, which represents an enormous time saver for having to enter all of these ratings. Okay. This is the percentage of ratings that were earned for respect for the day. And each column is going to show you the percentages. The average of your increasing targets minus the average of your decreasing targets is what this number right here represents. So the percentages represents the percentage of the rating points that the student earned. We want to see zeros over here. We want to see fours here. 0% as the daily result, or 100% as the daily result. Okay, so that's how you enter data. Now, because we are on online, we don't need to we don't need to save anything. It's automatically saved when I uh, press enter when I'm using the online version. Now, let's let's talk about um, home notes. You see there are two daily home notes, daily home note 1 and daily home note 2. Daily home note 1 is converting the four zeros through the fours on the left side of data entry, which is, just to go back, this side over here, it's converting that into upward facing arrows and converting the numbers on the right side, which is for decreasing numbers, decreasing behaviors, converting those numbers into downward facing arrows. And the reason why it does that is if we just put the numbers there, it would be confusing because there would be a 4 here and then there's a 4 over here, but the 4 over here is not good. So if we use just numbers, it wouldn't be enough of a distinction between what these numbers mean for the increasing versus decreasing side. So this tells us that these numbers are for the increasing targets and the downward arrows represent the decreasing targets. Of course, we want to see zeros over here. We want to see threes and fours over here, or I should say 3 or 4 increasing arrows, and we want to see zeros over here. Now this percentage right here is the daily percentage average of the increasing targets. So for this particular day, and you have to enter the date of the home note here at the top. We could pick a different day and it'll show us the data for that day. And this is the percentage average for the decreasing targets. And this is the increasing minus the decreasing. So for the day, Pete's overall average was 56%. Now, when you are using the online version and you want to send a home note, you can't copy the home note. And let me just scroll down. You can see each student has their home note available. But if I'm going to send a home note to Pete's parents, this copy button doesn't work because I'm using the online version. So what I need to do is use the Windows snip tool, which is the Shift key, the Windows key, and the letter S. And I'm holding down the Shift and the Windows key, keeping them pressed, and then I press the S, which makes the whole screen go dark. And then what I do is I move my cursor to the top left here, and I'm going to click and drag. So now my the home note for Pete is copied to the temporary storage area in the computer as a picture. And then when I go into Outlook, I can send it to Pete's parents, and I'll paste that picture right into the Outlook message and send it. And it'll show up perfectly formatted because it's a picture. Nothing has to be changed uh, to display it on the phone, to display it in Outlook. It's just like sending a photo of anything. And that is the preferred way of sending the home note. Now, there are these buttons here, and I'm going to show you how this is used a little bit later on. All right, so we also have a weekly home note. Now, with the weekly home note, we have a little bit of a different problem. And the reason is you can see because of this slanty type here, it doesn't register correctly. Let's put in the 14th because that's a full week. All right, I can't use the snip tool and this isn't formatted right. So if I want to send or print out, that is, a weekly home note, I have to open up Excel using the desktop app. Now once I do that, all of these other tabs become available. So I want to make kind of a conceptual break here. Up to now, we've been using the online version because our primary need here has been in entering data. What we're going to do now is use some of this other functionality of TPS, but to do so, I have to be able to open up TPS using my computer's version of Excel. And the way that you do that is you go to the top right under Editing, and you just click on Open in Desktop App. Okay, it's that simple. Now, because I am recording this, it slows things down a little bit. We'll just wait for it. And it's going to be opening it up. And you can see what it's doing on the screen. It's launching this demo file, uh, and it's converting it from this online version to the desktop version. And so it's doing that, oh, too slowly, but it will eventually get to it. And then what we can do is print this home note page. Now, why don't we send the home note on email? The reason why is that it becomes quite small. It's really best to print the home note for a weekly home note. Okay, I'm just waiting for my tabs to show up, which we'll do in a second, and here they are. Okay, so now all of my functionality is available. Everything is going to look pretty similar. We have the data entry, which looks pretty similar. We have the setup, okay, and we have our daily home note, looks pretty similar. Now, because TPS is opened using the desktop app, I can also click on this now, and it copies that one home note. Now, why would I want to do that instead of the snip tool? It's available, but frankly, the snip tool is better. And the reason why is if you click on this to copy this, it, it then needs to be pasted as a picture. And if you paste it just by clicking on the paste icon once you're in Outlook, it wants to paste it as an Excel file, which won't show up on phones. So it's best to paste it as picture, but it's even better, rather than using this copy function, is even if I'm in Excel, I can still go Windows, Shift, and S and use the snip tool. So if that's the case, why do I keep this copy function? Well, there are some occasions where that is a convenient thing to do. But even after you've opened up TPS using your desktop version, still use the snip tool. All right, now let's go back to this weekly home note. So it's just like the daily home note, just a lot more information because now I've got the whole week to look at. So I'm going to make this smaller so that you can see the orientation of it. Okay, so here is the whole note. Now, I can also still copy, and I can also paste it as a picture in Outlook if I wanted to. Everything gets pretty small if you're trying to look at it on a phone size screen. So a lot of times we want to print it, and in order to do so, you put the Monday's date for that school week, and then you simply go to print. Now watch what happens when I print it. It's going to show you that first page, but look down here at the bottom. It says here I have 12 pages because I have 12 possible students. If I only wanted to print Pete's, I would put here page 1 through page 1. Or if I wanted to enter or print also Corey's, I would put page 1 through page 2. Otherwise, I'm going to print all 12 of these pages. Okay. So once again, it takes the data from your data entry and it shows these increasing arrows, these decreasing arrows, and the notes that have been entered. And that's how you do your weekly home note. Okay. A little bit of a housekeeping thing, which I've been kind of waiting for a moment to get back to. When you get your link from me of your TPS file, go ahead and make it a favorite in your browser so that way you can more easily find it when you need to. All right, at the end of that, maybe I'll show you how to do that, end of this training. Oh, wait, a couple other things that I want to talk about. This training's already gotten a bit long, but I do want to point out how this Paulbucks thing works. So each week, let me scroll back here to data entry. Each day, the student earns percentages for the increasing and target and decreasing target behaviors. They can also earn pause. Now, each day, a student can earn up to 5 pause. And the way to enter these pause in is just like this here. Now, you don't necessarily need to do it all on one recording period. You can enter 4 pause a day for a total of 20 for the week. So the way that it would work would be, I changed that, corrected that to PAW 4, is you just type the word PAW and then a number next to it. It could be PAW 1, PAW 2, PAW 3, or PAW 4. A student can earn 4 PAWs a day or 20 PAWs for the week. Now these PAWs are bonus points for when the student exhibits a particularly good behavior or has a particularly good recording period, which would mean, let's say that the student, I'm looking for one right here. Okay. Pete had a really great morning, and so maybe I would put paw 2. All right, no spaces between the paw and the number. And don't add an S there, like pause or anything like that. This is a code that TPS is looking for. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to add, together with the percentages, it's going to add dollars to the students' PBIS totals. Now, in this demo, there are different data files, but what this does is it creates a checkbook balance. So you can see that, let's say it was January 26th, which would be Friday. Pete has $90 to spend at the Roar store. And what that will do is if we click over here to Paulbucks, it is going to give Pete $90 to spend, and this dollar is printed, and it's printed 3 per page. So the student is given the dollar bill to go to the Roar store so that the student can spend those dollars on various prizes that are there. Now, after the student makes a purchase, you would go back and you would enter how much is spent, just like a checkbook. So let's say Pete spent $40 and we enter that 40. What that's going to do is now change his balance. So now he has $50 to spend. So these totals right here are based on the percentages that are accrued during that week. And it adds dollars to the running balance based on what the current balance for that week was, which was based on the earnings. And so this is a checkbook balance based on Roar scores. So the way that it works is if we click over to W sum, you can see that it's the percentage of the increasing targets minus the percentage of the decreasing targets plus the pause that have been entered for that week minus the costs. Now we have not talked about the costs yet. The costs are penalties that the student can earn for particularly inappropriate behavior. Now when we look at our decreasing targets, the student is going to receive a 3 or a 4 to denote very inappropriate behavior. Now, if the student did something that was particularly egregious, you can also say cost 4 as one example. Could be cost 1. And what that's going to do, just like the paw and the number adds bonus points, the cost and the number decreases from the student's total. It doesn't remove the paws that were entered, but it does have a negative effect on it. And that way, the student can be provided with informative consequences that there is a cost for that behavior. And that's how those are entered in. And they show up when we go back here, when we go back to our W sum, it shows up in the cost column. And I just want to show you that that is the minus cost code. Okay. I think that is all that we're going to cover for today. I did say I wanted to go back to show you how you would save this as a favorites. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this, and it's going to say, do you want me to save it? And because I've entered some data, I'm going to say yes, I want to save it. And it'll take just a moment to do that. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go back to the online version once it gets done saving. Now we have to save it after we've entered some data using the desktop app. We don't have to save things if we've entered data using the online version because that automatically saves data for us. So I'm just going to click back to the data entry tab, which is typically where you're going to be when you're using the online version. So we'll just wait for it. There it is. Okay. All right. Last thing, I know there's a lot of material, but the last thing I want to review with you is how to make this a favorites. And so in each browser, there is some facility up at the top here. And by clicking on this, it's going to open up this window, and I'm going to add this page to my favorites. So now this page is a designated favorites, and it's at the bottom here. Now here's what else I can do. I can take this and I'm going to click away, and I'm going to go up here, and I am going to well, let's see, hesitating here. Some if your browser is configured with a favorites bar, then what you can do is you can drag this onto your favorites. I'm sorry I don't have that showing right now, but at any point what I can do is go to my favorites by clicking on the favorite icon, and I'm going to just scroll down, and I'll click on that, and that's how it accesses the website. It's just like any other favorites that you click on in the browser that you're using. That makes it very easy to get to. If the favorites bar was showing, I could actually drag it in there so that it would be just a one-click ready access. I don't have that showing at the moment, but that could be configured. Okay. There's still, of course, a ton more to talk about, but this has gone on long enough. And so we will do some more trainings as the year goes on. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at lewis.weber@sarasotacountyschools.net. And the spelling is Lewis, Weber with one B. And there it is. Forget the H. So lewis.weber at sarasotacountyschools.net. Okay, well, thanks for sticking with us. as we reviewed key features of TPS for Oak Park. I hope you have a wonderful school year, and I look forward to meeting each of you as the school year progresses.